Right, Mead, everyone. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I'm Mead, and I'm a consultant at the Scale Factory, and match my slides. So yeah, we're a DevOps and cloud infrastructure consultancy based here in London. Tonight, I'm going to share with you my top 5 reasons for not migrating to the cloud. My talk is based on conversations and discussions that I've had with all kinds of people, from engineers on the ground all the way up to C-level executives. One of the most bizarre reasons given to me for not migrating to the cloud was that there was this one executive that liked seeing all the blinking lights in the data center because he could see where the money was being spent. Now, while you can appreciate where he was coming from, most of the reasons that I'm going to talk about today are a little bit more rational. Now, sorry Matt, I'm not actually trying to convince you not to migrate to the cloud. So, I don't know if you read the little abstracts I sent you. For those of you that didn't read the abstract, I'm sorry. Actually, what I'm going to do is look at these 5 reasons and give some rational arguments to counter them. So maybe you're a bit sceptical about moving to the cloud, maybe your colleagues are, or maybe you're already bought in, but there might be some interesting content here that you can use to argue with other people. So for the past 10 years, I've been working with various cloud hosting providers, although I think actually Rackspace now do mostly AWS. Yeah. So, but I've been working most of that time with Amazon Web Services, so throughout this talk, most of my examples will be AWS-centric. So first up, why change? Imagine you've got a whole load of physical infrastructure in the data center, serving the business needs, it's making the company money. Why change? Well, what's the reason? So, how about we look at what happens if you don't change? Hopefully you understand where I'm going with this one. So, maybe you already knew that Netflix wasn't always about streaming media. They used to be a DVD rental service. That's what they started off. A bit like Blockbuster. So, what happened? Netflix changed. Netflix adapted their business, capitalised new markets, new opportunities. Now, I don't know if you actually know, but Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix at one point in time, and they turned the offer down. Now, there must be some person sat there really regretting that decision. But yeah, Blockbuster stuck to their guns. People are going to still want to go into the shop and rent DVDs and videos and whatever. And fortunately, they failed as a business. None of us want to wind up being next Blockbuster, do we? So we have to ask ourselves, what is core to our business? What separates us from the competition? What do our customers want, and how can we meet those needs? We need to concentrate on what differentiates us from the competition. And we need to avoid anything that might distract us from that. If hosting your own hardware does not set you apart from the competition, why do it? It's just a distraction, right? What makes us think that we can do a better job of hosting than a major cloud provider? It's what they specialise in. It's the core of their business. We want to focus all of our energy on producing value for our customers. Could we be too small to benefit from the cloud? In the cloud, the barrier to entry for enterprise-grade hosting is lowered. We don't have to buy hardware up front. We just pay for what we use. Small teams can benefit immensely from leveraging the services of the cloud providers Small teams cannot afford to spend their time writing boilerplate code or reinventing commodity services if it doesn't set them apart from the competition. Why do it? And by using out-of-the-box services, those small teams can focus on what matters to their business, solving the business problems, delivering value to customers. Automation acts as a force multiplier. We can do so much more with so less. So for example, something that might have taken days for somebody to complete can now be done in minutes. And that person can work on far more valuable things to the company. I've worked with small companies with 2 or 3 developers, and they've migrated to the cloud, and plenty of startups that have founded their business in the cloud. And I would go as far as saying that those small companies would have had to have hired far more staff to achieve what they have. And some businesses may not exist today. What about the inverse? Could we be too big to benefit from the cloud? After all, if you're a big business, you can afford data centres, you can afford that capital outlay or hardware up front. Could you be too big? Personally, I've worked with companies with thousands of developers and hundreds of sprint teams and tens of thousands of products, migrating everything to the cloud. So why are they doing it? How do they benefit? All of the reasons that apply to a small company scale up to a large business. Big businesses are notorious for moving slowly. They're often likened to a big ocean liner trying to change course on the ocean. But once in the cloud, big businesses can respond quickly to market changes, like a small business. They can compete with them. So let's take the example of a ticketing system that you might use to, you've got your data center, and you want to make a change, so you go to your ticketing system, you create a ticket, somebody gets assigned the ticket, they go away and do some work, maybe they go and change a setting on a firewall, physically plug in a cable, they come back, update the status of the ticket, you validate that they're plugged into the right port, and then you close the ticket. In the cloud, we're dealing with APIs. This means that we can write code to automate changes for us, and that code can be reused. Not only can it be used to do the actual work for us, but it can also record the changes that it made for auditing purposes. And it also removes the human error element. To survive, businesses need to adapt. That means bringing out new products and features and moving into new markets. No matter the size of our business, we can leverage the cloud to gain the flexibility and agility to be more experimental. We can try new ideas quickly and cheaply. You're all familiar with the massive billion-pound projects, IT projects that go on for years and years and years and never seem to end. More money getting pumped in. You can use the cloud to be much more experimental. Try out those ideas without making those commitments. Another reason that I've heard for not migrating to the cloud is that it's expensive. Now, most people consider the on-paper cost, but there are actually 2 other types of costs to consider. We have the on-paper cost, and here is a really simple illustration. So on the left, we're renting some space in the data center. We've got some hardware charges, the cost of the server, setup charges, colo, and the cost over 3 years is just over £2,600. Where on the right-hand side, we've got an AWS EC2 instance of comparable spec, and although there are no hardware and setup charges, the running costs are almost 3 times the on-premise solution. So on paper, it does look more expensive. And when most people say, oh, cloud hosting is expensive, this is usually what they're referring to. The second thing to consider are the hidden costs. The salaries and overheads of staff racking the hardware and keeping it running. The fact that a significant proportion of the on-premise hardware will sit idle. If you've got test or development infrastructure, does it really need to be running 24/7? If I power off a physical machine, I don't save on that initial outlay. But in the cloud, if I power off an EC2 instance, I see immediate savings because I'm only paying for what I'm using. And what if we want to make our products highly available? What if we want to expand into markets in other countries? This is a map of AWS's regions. There's 54. There's more coming this year. That's what the little green circles are. So they got pretty good coverage, right? Apart from Africa and Russia. No matter the size of my business, I can create an AWS account and I can launch my products globally with very little overhead. If we try to achieve this in-house, not only will we have to hire staff at each location with all of the associated overheads of that, we'd also have to consider the additional network hardware, transit providers, and so forth. And what about the laws in those countries? How can we ensure that we're compliant? So, how can we calculate these hidden costs? Now, it might be possible to gather the information in your business, but sometimes that always isn't that easy. Amazon have produced a calculator that you can use, which we can use to estimate the total cost of ownership. Just plug in some values and it will guesstimate those overheads for you. Another hidden cost that you cannot calculate that easy is the cost of lost opportunity. If it takes me 4 to 6 weeks to plan, buy and provision some hardware to get a new project up and running, a new product to market, that's just adding to the timescales to deliver the project. And if a competitor can achieve the same in 5 minutes, they're going to beat us to market. So even if the on-paper costs are higher, the value in being able to provision and decommission on-demand resources wins. In the modern world of agile software development, we often find that interactions with finance are still very waterfall. You have to produce a product roadmap, you have to estimate what hardware you need over the next 3 to 5 years, do capacity planning, budget for all of that. It's very focused on capital expenditure. Whereas in contrast, the pay-as-you-go model you get with the cloud follows an operational expenditure model, which is very much in alignment with Agile. You no longer have to plan and buy all of that hardware years in advance. If you need it, you just buy it, you just pay for it. So although on the surface, running workloads in the cloud might seem really expensive, when you factor in all of the hidden costs, the total cost of ownership, and being constrained by that agile, being constrained by that waterfall financial model, you'll find that running your own hardware can be far more expensive than using the cloud. So this is the next one. And I've written security/compliance here, because in conversation, normally people use them interchangeably, but are they really the same thing? So the dictionary definition of compliance is conformity in fulfilling official requirements. So by conforming to a set of requirements, we're compliant. And do those requirements cover all aspects of security? Probably not. So my point here is that fulfilling requirements is just a checkbox exercise, whereas being secure is more of an ongoing battle. Now on that basis, let's take a look at how security and compliance interplay with the cloud. Here's a selection of the compliance programs that AWS follow. Now I will caveat this, not all of their services cover all of these programs. So there's a link at the bottom, go and have a look. But they're constantly rolling them out across all of their services. It's a pretty comprehensive list, right? Now, let's loop back to those hidden costs. Compliance is another one of those. When I spin up an EC2 instance on AWS, that instance inherits all of the compliance controls for the physical facility, hardware, up to the hypervisor. Let me put that another way. I can power on a virtual machine in a PCI DSS level 1 data center from 10 pence per day. Compare that with the on-premise. And not only is the amount of infrastructure scope for compliance reduced, but the amount of infrastructure you need to consider from a security point of view is reduced too. So, for example, Amazon patch the hypervisors for you. They update the firmware on the switches and the routers. And if you're using their relational database service, they patch the virtual machine for you too. In fact, most of the major cloud hosting providers patch their hardware before those patches will be made available to the general public. We no longer have a big firewall at the perimeter in the cloud, like you might have on-premise. And we no longer implicitly trust everything behind the firewall. In the cloud, we have zero trust networks. We adopt defense in depth. There is no longer a single layer of protection at the edge. We have layers of security throughout the entire stack. And those security measures are implemented with API calls, so we can automate them, and then we can constantly validate that they're in place. By moving away from security at the perimeter to defense in depth, we are much better protected against lateral attacks. Now, if you're familiar with Equifax and the hack that they had not that long ago, that's how they were attacked. An application server was compromised, and it allowed the attackers beyond the perimeter, into the data center, into that environment with lack of security. Now, Google's Beyond Court model is a modern approach to security that we can adopt. Networks are no longer implicitly trusted. Trust nothing. There's a strong sense of identity, so you can ensure that the right people have access to the right resources and encrypt access to everything. I'd really encourage you to go away and have a look at Google's Beyond Court model. It's the future and makes end users' life so much easier. No more VPNs. Put everything on the internet, all of your internal systems. That's what Google are doing. So to recap, by having a shared responsibility model with the cloud service provider, you have less compliance and less security requirements to consider. The security perimeter is moved, you're forced to defense in depth, and that makes your systems much more secure. The next concern, it's difficult. We need to learn new skills. We need to hire people. We need to change the way we work. I'm really sorry to disappoint everyone, but there is not a quick and easy path to the cloud. Yeah, there are tools, there are methods that can help along the way, but there'll always be some pain points when migrating a new system. And a lot of the time, cloud migrations are conflated with other major initiatives. For example, DevOps or Agile transformation. Adopting practices such as continuous integration or continuous delivery. Getting up to speed with infrastructure as code. Breaking out a monolith into microservices, or maybe putting those services into containers. So much change, so many challenges can be off-putting, and there can be a tendency to just carry on as we are. But as the sketch illustrates so well, sometimes we just have to stop, make some changes to enable future success. And the same logic can be applied to cloud migrations. And over the years, I've had so many conversations that went the same way as this sketch. Companies or teams provision everything by hand in the data center, saying that they're too busy to automate things, too busy to change the way they're working. And that's me there, handing the round wheels. Like, it helps speed things up, automate things, make them more agile. We're dealing with production systems. Systems that are making our companies money. Moving them is like changing the tyres on a car whilst driving it. It is indeed difficult, but it's possible, right?
With the right people, yeah.
So yeah, it might be challenging, but that shouldn't be a barrier. The payoff is immense. We're not building better software, and we end up moving much faster. So migrating to the cloud isn't easy. We need to learn new skills, we need to adapt, but the benefits to the systems we build and operate are worth it. Our systems become more resilient, and practices that are once difficult and time-consuming, such as scaling up a product or deploying, become effortless. And finally, what about vendor lock-in? Or as I like to call it, what we currently have. One company that I worked with was concerned about vendor lock-in with the cloud. Yet on-premise, their applications were running on VMware, they had an Oracle database, they had a couple of Citrix Netscaler load balancers. What they didn't realise was that they were already locked in with vendors. And by migrating to the cloud, they were effectively swapping out one set of vendors for another. Maybe some level of vendor locking is unavoidable. So, what if we represent vendor locking as a spectrum? If we want to completely avoid vendor locking, then we're on the left-hand side, building our own hardware from scratch. Whereas if we're on the right, then it's almost impossible to migrate. Somewhere in the middle we have AWS EC2, which is a virtual machine. A little bit further along, AWS Lambda. Anybody familiar with Lambda? It's a serverless thing. And it's that way because it's a bit less portable. So, what level of vendor locking is acceptable for our business? Let's think back to what our business differentiators are. Could the time we save by using less portable services like AWS Lambda get our product to market much quicker? Then if the product is successful, as it expands, we could move more towards EC2 to make it more portable. It's something to consider. So if we accept that there will be at least some degree of vendor lock-in, how do we mitigate that? Now we could have layers of abstraction so that we're not interfacing with the cloud provider services directly. So for example, we could have a library within our application so that we're so it's not a good idea? Abstracting?
We do that with Terraform, it's a nightmare.
Ah, okay. So I'm not. So at like the application level. So instead of your application using AWS S3 directly, you can use a library and then it's abstracted away. So your application doesn't care. So that you could use any of these three services as an object store, and then that way, if you did need to change providers, you're not changing your application code. You just swap out a bit of config to go to use a different backend for the object store. And if you're concerned about feature availability across cloud providers, we have to remember that they're in competition with each other. And although Amazon is ahead, the other providers are hot on their tails, and they're producing other services that are making Amazon stop and think. And Amazon, EKS, Kubernetes, they're trying to catch up with the other providers. We also need to consider if and how we get our data out and what those costs might be. That's probably the most important point. And we can also store a copy of our critical data with another cloud provider. So that's another mitigation. So to focus on what differentiates our business, we have to effectively outsource some of our concerns to other companies. And that inevitably leads to some level of vendor locking. And if we look at vendor locking as a spectrum, then we can decide what level is acceptable for our business. And the most important thing is, can we extract our data? So, very quick summary. Leveraging our cloud allows us to focus on what differentiates our business, what sets us apart from the competition. And by using on-demand, flexible infrastructure, we can save cost, and we can bring Agile to the entire business, not just software engineering. Bring it to finance, bring it to all aspects of the business, make us more competitive, and enable us to capitalise on new markets quickly. Thank you for listening.
Good stuff, Mike. Thank you very much. We've got a question for Mike. At the back, just a second.
First of all, very good talk. Really loved it. However, I work with companies that don't have any money, no money at all. Yes, so there is no AWS, there is nothing. We make servers, we put it onto the internet, and that's how we work. How do we survive in what you're talking about?
Okay, very, very good question. So I don't know what the scale of these systems are, but most cloud providers have a free tier, and if you operate under that, you don't have to pay much.
I want to go on, but I don't want to go on because
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think
Are you right?
Okay. We can. I'll be hanging around afterwards, so we can have a chat a bit about it.
Really interesting on that. I thought there was going to be something about like the hidden costs.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, we need to pay money for EC2, but surely there's not no money.
Yes.
There's money from somewhere to spend on servers. There we go. Sorry, the question was it you, sir?
What about speak to patch if it is publicly announced on AWS so we're secure?
So yeah, that's quite an interesting one because, well, most things like that, there are sort of rumours about, and Amazon patched that really quickly. I think Amazon patched their hypervisors. They had mitigation for that. You still had to deal with like the kernels that you had and the virtual machines that you were running, but the underlying machines they patched really quickly. And I'm working with companies at the moment who still have some physical hardware on premise that they're still patching against that. So it's like, if they're not like before the patches have been made available to the major distros, then it's soon after.
Okay, there was one more somewhere. Jimmy, hello. Sorry, that sounded a bit Lucifer. Maybe.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the talk. I wanted to pick up on the finance thing as well. First of all, we totally agree all in on the cloud, but I think there's a lot of fallacy around the financial side. With a company that was accredited and running on a data center and has moved pretty much fully to the cloud, but the costs, to have cost saving, there's a lot of dependency on scaling. And I'm going to exclude Kubernetes and containers in this because I'm not familiar enough to actually comment on the benefits or cost benefits within that. But certainly based on EC2 instances and other such services, actually being able to control your scaling is key to saving costs.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard problem in our experience. The best counter-argument I've heard to that argument is actually don't do it for the money. I mean, move to the cloud, but do not do it for the cost savings.
Yeah.
So I was just curious to ask whether you know of good scaling or people who've really done scaling well to save money.
So I think that's a really good question, and I'll start with a conversation that I had ages ago with a customer that wanted to have infinite auto-scaling, right? We want to scale all the things forever so we can handle everything. And then I pointed out to them that if somebody like DOS them or sent them a huge amount of traffic, then it would bankrupt their tiny startup with a couple $100,000 in the bank. So I think your business has a limit to how much it can scale to, You can operate the cloud like the data center. So with AWS, you can provision a fixed number of EC2 instances, and you can reserve those. They've got their reserved instances, so you pay up front, you save a bit of money. So you can migrate to the cloud. You can operate what you have like the data center by reserving those instances, and then there's business decisions that need to be made, like how much you want to kind of scale on that. You know, if these applications are making your company money, if you're running an e-commerce site, more customers on the website, more compute you need, more money. So, yeah, I don't know, does that sort of answer your question, or? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think some companies are kind of think, well, let's move to the cloud, and we'll have some of the magic cloud fairy dust, and that'll make us instantly more agile and stuff. And then realise there's a whole load of stuff you need to do to make yourself cloud native and get the most out of this stuff.
Yeah.
By running it in a different way. So yeah, totally. Just under one more.
Yeah.
Somebody else got a question somewhere? So I'm going to use it because you're closest.
Hi. Just want to get a rough idea because you guys do some kind of transformations and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big fan of Docker and that kind of transformation as opposed to more Terraform, console, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
From the work that you have done so far, which way do you lean? In terms of being cloud agnostic and getting it out faster? Both points.
So I think coming back to the spectrum thing, if you try and make something super cloud agnostic, then you've got an overhead to that. So the approach that I would normally take is get something out there first, and then work with that. So I've worked with loads of companies that have tried to build something with Terraform and some container orchestration so they can deploy anywhere in the cloud. And a couple of years later, they still haven't gotten to the cloud. So get something moving first and kind of build on that. The container story is an interesting thing with a layer of abstraction. And actually, I think what we'll probably see is, and what we're seeing now is a lot of hybrid setups where you use that as your layer of abstraction, so you can make the cloud and the data center look the same, and then you can use some of the practices in the data center, and then use the cloud for bursting and experimenting with products, and then kind of shift in between. So.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.